name is Harold Pearson. I am alcoholic. Yeah, and a lot of you here probably could tell it better than I can tonight. But anyway, Kurt asked me, I don't know, 5-6 weeks ago about doing this. And anyway, it's always a privilege and honor to be asked to do anything for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And especially in this building here. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this building is sacred. There are probably more miracles taking place in this building here than any church in Moore County, I would say. And I'm not trying to step on feet of any church members, anybody such as that, but I just know I've seen them, I've heard about them, and so forth. My first AA meeting was right here in this meeting back in October 1977, and it was back about 3/4 of the way back that way to, y'all turning around here the last few weeks and everything. But I do remember the coffee was back there. Somebody brought me a cup of coffee that night, and I put it down because I couldn't handle it. I mean, really, I had to sit on my hands. I was shaking. I had no idea what I was doing, But first of all, let me get a little housekeeping out of the way. I did tell you my name. I told you it was alcoholic, hopefully. But anyway, I've got a home group. It's the Old Time Structure Group. We meet at 7 o'clock on Wednesday night at Samaritan Chapel in Rockingham, between Rockingham and Ellerby. But anyway, it's a small group, but we've been meeting for 22 years now, and we've got about 10, 11 charter members that are on a regular basis and so forth, and we have a few more from time to time. But anyway, it is my home group. They hold me accountable. And so I do have a sponsor. He introduced me tonight. He's a person that, when he started helping me with that charitable golf tournament, I don't know, quite a few years ago and everything. One day I came up here, we were going to meet about the golf tournament, and I was all cranked up about something that went on that day prior to coming here. And after I talked for about an hour, I said, my sponsor has moved to the beach. And I said, I had to call him and everything. And I do, I never like virtual meetings or anything like that. I need, I want to see people in the flesh, so forth. And I never really like to use the phone or the call. And so anyway, it was a lot of you know Father Mike. He retired and moved down to the beach. And he was right over at Wadesboro, so we was right close together. But anyway, Kurt's always had a calming effect over me, and that day, and he said, yeah, and so and we meet quite often right here in this building. So again, that makes it this building important to me. Just the things that happen here, and the many meetings here, and the many people that's walked through these doors and so forth. It's really miraculous. But anyway. Like I say, I made my first meeting here in October 1977, and what happened after that meeting, that Sunday night, that was on a Tuesday night. That Sunday night, I had made a phone call to a cousin's husband of mine, Herbert Crisco. Herb's dead now, but I knew he was in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know what Alcoholics Anonymous was. I rode in the back seat of his car with the intentions of getting some beer. We was at a family reunion event, and I was gonna, catch a ride with him. But while I was sitting in the back seat, I happened to look down the floorboard, and he had the brochures, the little pamphlets, AA pamphlets and everything. What is AA and things such as that? And I saw that, and I really wanted to pick some up and try to find out what AA was, because I was the type of person, I knew from the get-go I had a problem. I really did. And I'd be in a doctor's office or something, waiting to be seen, or dentist's office or something like that. And I'd pick up a magazine if it had anything on the front, like a red book or something like that. Are you an alcoholic? And I'd try to, make sure nobody wasn't looking at me. But I'd read about it, trying to figure this thing out. So I knew, I was doomed, and I knew probably that I needed some of that literature. But I wouldn't pick it up. But see, I knew he was in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that Sunday night, I'd been down to Lumberton. My half sisters for lunch that day. I had to take 100 proof Smirnoff vodka with me to drink while I was there, to keep from shaking at the table, throwing forks or turning water over and things such as this. And so So anyway, on the way home, my wife at that time just kept talking, you need to do something, you need to do something. And she said, you need to call somebody, or I needed to quit drinking what she was saying. And so I thought to myself, I'm gonna call her, but if she'll quieten down, I'll do that. And I did. I made that phone call, and he told me, he said, hold on. He said, and it was a World Series on that game on that night. Like I say, it was in October. And he said, when a meeting's over with, I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, when a meeting's over with, I'll call somebody to come with me. The 12-step call, go in pairs. And so I said, okay, that's fine. Of course, I was about drunk, and they showed up, and what they told me was about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and how it changed their lives and so forth. And and I listened, and they told me, said, if you want to go to a meeting, if you stay alcohol free until Tuesday night, meet us at a certain place in Rockingham. I lived down in Scotland County, lived out in the country about 3 miles from the little community. Wasn't about 500 people in that community where I went to school, where went to church, where bought groceries and things such as that. But anyway, you had to leave that town, and it was in North Carolina. You go back through South Carolina to get to my home in North Carolina, but that's sort of the way it was. But I live about 4 years the road out there from South Carolina. But anyway, what I did is they told me to meet them in Rockingham that Tuesday night, and I did, and they brought me up here to a meeting. Now, what was ironic about that meeting, after the meeting was over with, there was 2 cars come from Rockingham, and there was 12-step a guy afterwards. I had no idea what a 12-step meeting. My first AA meeting, and they told me when they gave out chips that night, I said, don't try to pick one up. Said, we'll get you one tomorrow night, in Rockingham at the meeting. And that's why I picked mine up that Wednesday night. But they said, you're too bad of shape to even try to pick it up. But anyway, we went on a 12-step meeting. Somebody, I remember a guy by the name of Bobby Baker. He was a big guy, and he reminded me of Billy Graham, appearance-wise and everything. But that's who they went to 12-step. And so I stayed out in the car, me and somebody else, while they went in. And then there was about 4 of them went in. Then 2 of them come back out, and they said, "Well, he's not ready, but so and so they're going to go ahead and talk to him anyway." And so we went back to Rockingham. So I made a 12-step call, my first AA meeting. I guess that's what you would call it. But anyway, needless to say, I had some more drinking to do. But from that night here for about 2 years and 8 months, I went and I drank some NyQuil. But other than that, I didn't drink no other alcohol. But I knew I was drinking that NyQuil. I don't know. I'd gone about 8 months, and I was going to meetings, and I wasn't drinking. And I didn't get a sponsor. I got a big book. They gave me a big book that Wednesday night at that meeting in Rockingham Presbyterian Church. They gave me a big book. They gave me a little 24-hour-a-day book, and I started reading the Meditations each morning. I read that big book in, I guess, 2 or 3 days. At that time, I was laying brick, and it was rain or something like that. It didn't work, so I had time to read it from front to back. And I knew I was alcoholic. I mean, before I got that book, I knew that there was something wrong with my drinking. And I knew I had no business drinking, but I could not drink. I mean, that was the simplicity of it, and so forth. So, but anyway, they gave me that, and I was going to meetings and not drinking, and things got getting better. Really, at least I was fulfilling my obligations. I was in business for myself, and I was getting more work, and things were a little bit better at home. I mean, me and my wife had 3 kids. I mean, they were like doorsteps, like 4, 3, 1, something like that, and it's just right close together. But so after a while, I decided I needed another business. You know how we want to make up for lost time, so I bought a country store, and I was going to double the income, and that was really stupid. And all I did was really wound up with 2 big checkbooks, and there wasn't no money. But I knew how to float checks, and that wife I had at that time, I'd reached the point where the money was leaving, and while the money was there, boy, I'd walk into the bank, they'd say Mr. Pearson and stuff like that. and I sort of like that. But then all of a sudden the money was, it was getting bad, and so I convinced her to go to the back and take care of the business. And then after a while, she just quit doing it, and by this time, what I was having to do, because I was having to conduct business, and I would put notes in the night deposit box, and tell them to do this, do that, and I'd put some money in there with it too. But a lot of times you put that note in there and you realize you said the wrong thing or something, you got to put another note. And I'm sure at that bank they knew, I was pretty well known in a little bank over in Hamlet. But anyway, it was really getting bad. But it was during that time period that I did drink the NyQuil. And I remember when I was drinking that NyQuil, I remember by this time I'd graduated from AA. I'd made it 13 months. I spoke one night. I spoke for about an hour and 45 minutes. We won't do that tonight. I can't see the clock, though. I don't know what I'm going to do. I keep looking that way, right? But anyway, I graduated, and by that time I'd quit going to meetings, but I was drinking that NyQuil, and I remember what they said in AA about anything that had alcohol in, cough syrups, anything, you'd leave it alone, and I knew that. But anyway, and I drank that, but I was able to get through that without picking up liquor or beer again, and I kept going. But it was really, you're talking about being in terrible shape now, is to be in an emotional wreck. I mean, I got to the point mentally I didn't know where I was going or coming. I'd be headed to Laurinburg, and I realized I was supposed to be going to Laurinburg, or vice versa, or whatever. And I wasn't fulfilling my obligations. I wasn't returning phone calls, And finally, in June of 1980, it reached a point that I walked into that. Like I said, I bought that country store, and I walked in there that night, and my wife and the 3 kids was there. They had a little apartment out back, at the back of it, so it was an ideal thing, and she could work up there in the daytime and see about the kids too and all, and then I was going to come in at night, count the money and take care of things. But anyway, I told her, I said, y'all about to worry me to death. And I went behind the counter, and most of you won't know what it was, but it was little spirits of ammonia, a little brown bottle, the little thing, and it was 65% alcohol. And now I had detoxed myself many times. I didn't know what a detox was, but I knew how to detox. You get that in a Coca-Cola and drink a couple of them, and you level off, And I learned that when I was in high school, seeing guys at this store where I worked at on Saturdays come in and get that. And I'd see them level off. So I knew to use that, but I never got on a drunk with it. And I didn't intend to drink that night, but I got me a bottle of that, and she left. I got me a Coca-Cola, poured half the Coke out, poured that in it, drank it, got me another one, did the same thing. I said, who am I fooling? And I knew exactly what I had to do. And I went to these bootleggers in South Carolina. I woke them up. They knew me well, and they probably saved my life on several occasions and so forth. And they thought I was getting the liquor. I ordered some 100 proof Smirnoff. And they thought I was getting it from my uncle. And I told them, I said, no, this is from me. And they looked at me and they said, please don't start back. You've been doing too good to start back. And I said, I had to. And that was the truth. I had to. I don't think I would have made it much longer had I not started back drinking. My life was so unmanageable. And, you don't even have meetings to go to. You didn't. I don't know what I'd done with the big book. I'd hid it. I didn't want to see it. I knew that. and I think I'd given it to an uncle of mine. Thought he might need it. But anyway, and I mean, I was in bad shape. Now I'd been raised up in the church. I'd been raised up in Sunday school, church, Methodist church. Now I lay me down to sleep as a kid. I knew all that good stuff, and so forth. But I didn't know nothing about God. I really knew nothing about God. And I had a foul mouth, and I knew that I took his name in vain a lot. And I hated it. Every time I did it, I hated it, but I did it, and just everything else. My life was just total wreck, unmanageable, and everything else. But I for 3 days, I stayed drunk. And we were building, I was doing a mason work on an underground house close to where I work at now. Been working a while, but anyway, doing that, and I laid there on the job 3 days, and it was in June of 1980, hot, good and gracious alive. This man I was working for, he knew I needed money. He knew I needed money to, make payroll and stuff like that. But he said he was scared to talk to me. He said he didn't know I drank. But he found out I did, and he said he was scared to say anything because a guy that I'd known for a while, he came on the job and they said I was real ugly to him. I don't remember any of this. I was a blackout drinker, from the very start, and so forth. And I don't remember this, but he said I was real ugly to him. Through God's grace, years later, I got to make amends to him, and he became a real good friend. He was wound up as county commissioner and chairman of board of directors of Sand Hills Mental Health, and a real asset to where I worked at. But anyway, he what happened was I did get the money and I was able to pay. But after those 3 days, I said, God knows. I said, I remember something else I heard in AA. They said it was a progressive illness. And I said, they were so right. Because prior to that, and I wasn't, I don't know, 28, 27, 28, something. I don't know. But anyway, I was able to work. I'd always been able to work. It didn't matter how bad I got the night before, I'd get up and go to work. I would punish myself. I'd say, you stupid enough to do it. You need to hurt. You need to suffer and everything else. And I could do it. I'd had some hangovers. But anyway, and I knew what would take care of it when I got off work though. But anyway, what happened was, I lost my train of thought here. But anyway, after 3 days, I knew that it was what I'd heard was progressive illness. I decided to quit, but I couldn't quit. But what I did, I started slipping around, drinking a beer here, there, and everywhere else, and not wanting anybody to see me. I started slipping here and there, and I drank a lot in South Carolina. You'd get half pints there at the bootleggers, And that's why I drank a lot at bootleggers. I mean, just because it was sort of out of the way. It was my kind of people, and I wasn't. I just drank to get drunk anyway, and that's what would happen. But anyway, that went on for 8 months, and in February of 1981, I wound up in Florida. And what I prayed was on my last drunk, and God's grace and everything. I made it back home on a Thursday. That Friday night, I was all to pieces, and I called somebody that I remembered. I had his telephone number that was in AA, and I asked him about a place called the Colony, and I asked him what he knew about it and so forth, and he told me it was 8 weeks. And that didn't matter with me, he could have said 8 months, he could have said 8 years, it'd probably been all right, but I knew I needed a break. And see, I was at my brother's house because I came home. I knew I couldn't go home. I knew I wasn't welcome at home. And I went to my brother's, and so it was arranged. I made a phone call, and it was arranged for me to go there on a Saturday morning. And on February 21st of 1981, on a Saturday morning, my brother took me out there and left me. And some reason or other, I'm still there, but I don't know. He said he told me to stay. I don't remember him telling me that, but he said that's the only thing I've ever done he's asked me to do. He said, you ain't left yet. But anyway, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I needed a place to lay up and rest and try to figure out how to get out of the trouble I was in. I'd always been pretty good at that. I could figure out who was going to get me out of that trouble. But thank God I never came up with anybody to do it. And I guess that's the reason I'm still there, still trying to figure it out. But what happened was I went through that program and completely different it is now. But I did a 4-step and I did a 5th step. And I did a thorough searching and fearless moral inventory. And I remember writing that because I didn't have no resentments. The only person I resented myself. When I finally started writing that inventory, I resented everybody I'd ever known. And really, it just flowed. But I couldn't understand that. But I had to remember that, prior to that 4th step, that 3rd step says, make the decision, turn our will and life under the care of God. And I believe God was, telling me, put it to me from my mind into my fingers as I wrote it out. And I can remember doing that. And like I say, I did that 5th step and so forth. But see, my childhood, I was adopted. My biological mother died when I was 2.5. My I was adopted at that time or prior to that, and then my adopted father died when I was 13. And then my biological father died when I was 18, and my adopted mother died when I was 20. I didn't have no success with parents. But I spent a lot of time alone, and when you're alone, you know, you had to create games. And I lived out in the country, in a great place to grow up. We had, you know, all the animals and everything else. I had all the cats, dogs, and we had mules and cows and hogs and just everything. And I grew up working. That's one thing my mother instilled in me, a work ethic at a very early age, and I'm grateful for that today. But like I say, I had to spend a lot of time alone and create games, you know, that you play, and or whether it was baseball or whether it was basketball. And when you're creating these games and you're playing these games by yourself, you always win. You know, you always win, and I mean, you're always in control. You know, and so. I sort of had that mentality, you know, that, you know, you're supposed to win and you're supposed to be in control and everything. And but when I got to high school and the little school I went to, we didn't have nothing but baseball and basketball. But I was a pretty good basketball player, and I remember after my freshman year, and I could about show you the spot today. This was the type of person I was that the principal we walked and the coach that year, he was right out of college, and I really had a lot of respect for him. And I even decided then, you know, I might could go to college. I said, you know, because he was a coach and a phys ed teacher, all that good stuff. And I said, man, you know, because I thought to go to college you had to be a doctor or a lawyer. It would be the only reason that I would want to go. And I decided I wasn't going to be a doctor and a lawyer, so I was just going to grow up and farm and drink liquor. But anyway, I decided, you know, that possibly I could, you know, go and, you know, be a coach or something, because I really liked this guy. But me and the principal, Mr. Miller, was walking away from the lunchroom one day, and he told me, put his arm around me. He said, Jimmy, and that was Jimmy Harris. He was the basketball coach. He said, if you keep improving like you're playing now, and you keep improving, and by your senior year, you could probably get a scholarship to a small college. And I remember that ended it right then, because he said that I probably could, so I knew I could. And I never remember even putting any effort out to, you know, to get any better, you know. And by my junior year, I was drinking, so it really didn't matter then, you know. But I was that type of person that this doctor, that's my adopted father died, this doctor that sort of took over in a father role, because my mother worked for him. He would talk about how, you know, I could do this. I'd learn, you know, on the farm. He had part interest in a farm and machinery and things such as this, how quick I was to learn, and he would brag on me and everything. And, you know, really, and that wasn't doing me any good, because it was giving me the big head and the ego and everything else. But he finally realized that he was going to fire me off that farm. He was the first person to ever ask me. He said, "Are you an alcoholic?" And then he said, "You are an alcoholic." I said, "Oh no." He was going to give me abuse. I said, "Oh no, I won't take that." You know, but again, my mother was dying of cancer, and he took me to court for DWI. And on the way home, he said, you know, my adopted mother was named Milam. He said, you know, Milam didn't have many weeks left. And he said, would you please let her die in peace, you know. He said, you hell-bent on drinking. And he said, you know, we don't have no control over you. But he said, please let her die in peace. And, you know, I couldn't do that the night before she died. The next morning in the hospital, I didn't intend to. But I went to take a shower, change clothes, and I stopped to get a beer. And the next thing I know, I didn't know they had to get me out of the hospital. That was sort of the way my drinking was, just completely unmanageable. Now, after that episode that got me to the colony and everything, and I completed the program, and they asked me, you know, if we talked about what I needed to do and so forth, and they asked me about staying there, and I knew that the IRS, I done had conversations with them. They didn't want me back in business until I got straightened out. I know that and it took me 11 years to do that. But so I just stayed, and I was a glorified cab driver, and doing whatever needed to be done, and the miracle happened, and I was able to stay on. And the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has really been a blessing in my life. And back in my early days in recovery, and I say my early days, for the first few years and everything, there in Rockingham, we just had one discussion meeting a week, and it was on a Monday night. Back then, it was, and the other thing, there wasn't that much emphasis really in AA to work steps, and certainly, I had a sponsor, but we didn't work the steps. I'd meet with him, we'd talk and things such as that. Like I say, I'd done a fourth and fifth. I had an amends list. I was making amends and things such as this. But there wasn't as much emphasis as it is today, and thank God that the emphasis is on the importance of the steps and working the steps in our life and living by the steps. But anyway, it was more the fellowship, and we used to go on a lot of 12-step calls. And very early on, I had the opportunity, sometimes several times a week, to go out and late at night or whatever, to people's home and 12-step of me and somebody else would always go in pairs. The 7th Street Detox, a place in Charlotte, many a night I'd taken people up there, late at night and so forth, and it was a social detox up there. And you'd see people in DTs, you'd see them, hallucinating and seizures and things such as that. And of course, they certainly had medical attention too if they needed to get in the hospital. But that's a lot of what it was, and we would travel a lot. And I say travel a lot. We'd go down to Lumberton a lot of times to meetings. We'd go down to Ross, South Carolina to meetings. We'd come up here to meetings and so forth. And a lot of times it was the meetings that you had on the way to the meeting and the meeting on the way back home that was, so important. But as time went on and my kids were getting bigger, and this wife that I was talking about, we finally, it was an unworkable marriage, and it was, there's, my mother used to say 6 of one, half dozen the other, and I believe that, and we were not compatible at everything. We finally did divorce, and not to get into all that insanity, but anyway, and for a while there, I wound up a single parent with 3 teenagers in the home, and that was sort of crazy. And but another thing that was happening during that time period, I sort of had the feeling my kids would be all right. That I was going to dodge the bullets, because they went to a lot of AA meetings with me. My daughter, she would ask me, said, to go have cake there tonight? And she sort of decided what meeting she wanted to know where there's cake be there. But and the boys would go, and they would sit up front sometimes, and when he was giving out the chips, they would do this or something, and people didn't know what was going on. But it was and like I say, it was a lot of speaker meetings, and I got to meet a lot of people, and I got to travel a good bit and hear speakers from all over, and got to make a lot of friends in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And time rolled on, and went through that divorce, and then I was fortunate enough, and Kurt, I want to thank you or whoever was responsible for that cake back there. When I went back to get coffee and saw that cake, that's really nice. I took a picture of it because my wife, and a lot of you know my wife, she's in recovery, celebrated 30 years in December, but she couldn't be here tonight. I spent some time with her this afternoon, but anyway, she had people that from South Georgia was visiting her mother who lives across the road from us, and she needed to get back to see them because they were leaving early in the morning. But anyway, time rolled on, and this job I had, it became more and more responsibility, and and I, really it was sometimes it was more than what I thought I could handle. And I told people I drank myself into a job, and I drank myself into this, and so forth. But what happened was this. I told you I'd raised up in the church, and I had raised up in Sunday school, and now I laid me down to sleep and all. And I'd always believed in praying, but I, finally reached it was just selfish prayers that I prayed and so forth. And when I wound up at the colony, I remember telling the director and the Mac, who was the director, and he's also the chaplain there. He was a Methodist minister. He's about my age. And I told him, I said, you don't have to worry about me because, I've been to AA, this God of our understanding. I said, I got it covered. I know, I've always believed in God. And he told me, he said, the devil believes in God. He said, where does it leave you? And it left me wondering, and come to find out what I realized that I had to develop a relationship with God, And it was through this program I was able to do that, and through these steps I was able to do that, and so forth. And as time went on, that relationship got stronger and stronger, and I was asked to do things that I really didn't want to do or preferred not to do. But through God's grace and so forth, I was able to do things like that. When then I started speaking at churches, and then I was asked to do some participate in some funerals and things such as that. And I didn't feel adequate to do it, but I could always get through it. God would provide the way if I was willing to do it, and things. And so as time went on, that these things started happening in my life, and I went through a relationship or two that didn't wind up the way I thought it should. We can. When you was used to, as a kid, you was always the winner and you was always in control, and went through some down times, but I always, again, was able through sponsorship and through talking to people, I was able to get through those times. And one Sunday morning, I asked God, as some of you you certainly know what I'm talking about, the chapel there at the colony. Oh, I was standing there and I was waiting for Donnie Davis. He was the pastor at that time, the chaplain, and waiting for him to call me on up. I walked up, and that was my little altar time, And I just said, God, I'm tired of being alone, and miraculously, that afternoon, my wife today called me and asked me about coming up to a meeting up here in Aberdeen. I think it was Founders Day. I think it was having a here. But I was speaking in Rockingham that night, so I wasn't able to do it when we started seeing each other. And, time rolled on there for about 2 years, 2.5 years or something, and I was okay, we had a relationship and all that, and she was, come to find out, she was, wanting to get married. And and I got to thinking about it, and that God had answered my prayer that day, and that I'm okay, and I thought that thanks but no thanks, and that type of attitude. So I got busy and asked her, and we did get married and so forth. But again, that that when God gives you things that you ask for and everything, you better be grateful. You better sort of take advantage of it. And I was about to lose that, and I learned a lot from that experience as far as that goes in my prayer life. And my daughter, all three of my kids went through addiction. And a lot of you know my daughter, she's, I think, got about 8.5 years, soon be 9 years, whatever, in recovery now. And I just shake my head at how, when the miracle happened in her life, because I knew I was going to lose her. I knew it, some of you know some of the tale. But, and I did lose a son, Chris Pearson. I lost him, it'll be 16 years ago this July. And I used to hear people stand behind the podiums like this and talk about losing a child, or losing a loved one, or losing a wife and to addiction. And I think, God, how in the world do you get through it? How do you make it through those times? And what I come to realize that I realized the love of God through the people in AA during that time period, and not only AA but Al-Anon, because my daughter had been to a fellowship hall, and I went through a family program up there, and they told me at the end of that 4-day family program, said, you send people to Al-Anon, you need to go to Al-Anon. And thank God I came home, and for 4 years so I attended Al-Anon on a Tuesday afternoon at 6 o'clock at the Colony Chapel before the regular AA meeting at 8 o'clock at that time. And And I was in Al-Anon when Chris died. And again, it was the people in Al-Anon that, loved me and helped me through that. And I never had to think about taking a drink. But the big book tells us that, the problem centers in our mind. And I do believe that and so forth. Because like I say, I never could drink successfully. I drank a lot, I got drunk a lot, and I did a lot of crazy stuff and everything like that. But I never really was able to master it to any degree. And I remember 18 years into recovery, I was at a wedding down in Wrightsville. Well, it's actually in Wilmington. The wedding was in Wilmington, but they had the reception over at Wrightsville Beach, and this couple that was getting married, both of them was attorneys, and I was good friends with the bride's father, and so forth. And that's the reason I was invited. And my daughter was with me at that wedding too, and there was a lot of alcohol being served, and beer and mixed drinks and so forth. And it was at the surf club over there in Wrightsville Beach, and I found a punch bowl. Nobody was around it, and I got something. The girls assured me there was no alcohol in it. And I got me a little, whatever them little stem things is you can drink out of. And I got it, and because I wanted something in my hand. And so when I finished drinking it, out in the hallway, there was, a table there where people were putting their empties as they was going back to the bars to get a full one. And I set a little glass down there. And my hand, I picked up 3 beer cans and shook them. And that was, about 18 years in recovery. And my hand just automatically, I didn't think about doing that. I just reached and picked those beer cans up and shake them because that had been my behavior in past when, I was out of money or running low on money. People at the bathroom or, up dancing or whatever, I'd walk by their table and do that. And I, if there's beer in it, I just keep walking. It came out. It didn't matter what kind it was. But that really frightened me. Now I didn't have a desire to go to that bar or anything else, but thinking, dang, this thing, 18 years in recovery, and this mind will still just automatically do that, and so forth. But I did want to stay and to speak to the bride and groom, which I was able to do. But then I came on home because I knew it'd probably get wild there before that thing was over with. But and then I don't know, it was about 10 years ago, maybe one Sunday afternoon, I was sitting and watching TV, a football game was on, and Miller had come out with them big mouth, opened the can or something that made it bigger where you could get more out of it when you turned it up. and I was sitting there reading the newspaper, and when the commercial was on, and then watching the football game was it. But that beer pouring out, and it looked like it taken up the whole TV, coming out, the big mouth, and it went through my mind, boy, that looks good, and again, and I didn't have no urge to go to the convenience store and get the big mouth, any kind of mouth, I didn't have no urge to do that. But again, it tells me how real this illness I have, and that I need to stay committed to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I know, I was told early on, it don't matter how long you've been in recovery, how many days you got, how many months you got, how many years you got. You're just one drink away from a drunk, and I believe that. And I was also told that no matter how long you've been in recovery, each day you're in recovery, you're one day further away from that last drink and one day closer to that next drink. And I believe that also, so forth. I've seen, so many people do so well and everything, and they go back out, and some through God's grace are able to make it back. A lot are not able to make it back, and I know I've been blessed, and I don't know where I would make it back, and I don't want to find out anyway. But this again, how things work, and I told you I had that ego from winning all them games when I was playing by myself and all this, and I would sit in judgment of people, and this little community, and the police officer there in that town, he locked me up 2 or 3 times too. I got my first DWI, and I got my, I think, second DWI. I got or somewhere along. I know he got me twice for DWI, but anyway, he was a good man, and he had a right to get me because I was drunk. I mean, one time he told me, he called and told people, tell Larry not to move that car, that I'm gonna get him, and I didn't believe him. And he got me. I mean, that's how, alcohol would do me. I just didn't believe stuff. But anyway, he sold cars also. He had a little car lot there, and I'd completed the program at the colony and was trying to get my life organized again. I'd had a truck. I had to sell it to try to get some debts straightened out. Not the IRS. I couldn't get enough. I couldn't sell enough trucks just to get straight with them. But anyway, what happened? We needed a vehicle, and I thought about that man. And I called down there and I told him, I said, Emerson, and what had went on though, I'd sit there and watch people come into his office and pay $25 a week on a vehicle. And I think, now that's sorry. They have to, pay by the week or something like that for a vehicle, just, because I'd always, if I had one, it had been given to me, or I'd come up with some insurance money or something to buy one. I mean, to be able to pay it, pay for it at the time. And I would just sit there and watch that. And I had to call him and ask him, is there a possibility I could get a vehicle? And it didn't matter. I wanted a vehicle. My wife and the kids needed a vehicle. And so what I had to do is go down and get a vehicle. It was a little old Plymouth, and I think it was a probation officer's car. It was a state car because you raised the hood, and it had the numbers up there, the state numbers and everything. It just had that look about it. People picked at me about it. But anyway, it worked out. I paid $25 a week. And I was going to pay for it in a year. And I think really to pay for it in a year, I had to make about 4 extra payments, in that time. And I told him, I said, I'll probably make a little money extra here or there and so forth. And I think it took me about a little over a year to pay for that car, but I got it paid for and everything. But that was a great lesson, to learn, being judging people and so forth. And I just, again, like I say, I wish I could tell you I had some success somewhere or another along the line, but in drinking, but in recovery, I have greatly been blessed. I went through like I say, I went through the death of my son. I never, and I really had no animosity towards God. I accepted life on life's terms. And, I was telling somebody, I think I mentioned to Mark, people do die of this disease, and so forth. As sad as it sounds, and that that's part of life, and so forth. And I told somebody else tonight, said something about being an old timer. I said, I don't like the word old. I said, I've just been around a long time. I like the word long better than old, and I was diagnosed with prostate cancer about 2.5 years ago, and this past January I had it removed and so forth. And I never, with that, I never was really worried or anything else. I followed these steps. I'm powerless over what things such as that. And but I had the support to help me through that, and so forth. And everything's been good. Had total knee replacement on 2 knees here. This May will be a year ago, and I went through that. I didn't like going through it. I didn't like just not being able to do nothing for a while and everything. But being able to accept that and be able to accept life on life's terms. And I was talking about my wife, and her mother moved up here right prior to COVID, and she was again, this was a little God wink in our life. We'd look for a house, and for her, she was moving up from Lakeland, Florida, and she's 92 years old now. But anyway, she couldn't find a house, and one day I went home, and right across the road from us, and we live out in a rural area, right across the road, there was a house for sale, And I couldn't believe it, and I called my wife and I said, you better call, and was able to get it. And, to have her across that wasn't my choice to have her, but, God's provided the way to be able, and she's asked me to call her mom, and, she said, because you didn't have, mom long, did you? And, so I'll, to satisfy her, I'll call her mom every once in a while, and sometimes I won't do it just to aggravate her, but, like I say, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has been such a blessing in my life to have been able to do the things I've been able to do, and see the things I've been able to see, and be able to meet the people I've been able to meet, and experience the people I've been able to experience relationships with, and so forth, and it's just been miraculous, and I know I've been greatly blessed, and to be able to stand here tonight and ramble and talk about this, talk about a little bit about that, but again, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I appreciate everybody being here. And again, I hope this building 100 years from now, that miracles will still be taking place in this, because I really meant what I said. This building serves more, probably a greater need in this county than the churches do, and I do believe that. And I believe in church. Don't get me wrong, I believe in that, but the miracles do take place here, and I'm grateful to be one of those miracles, even though it didn't happen that time back in 1977. But that got me on the roll for it, so I'm grateful for that. And thank you, Kurt, for asking.